Hey there, and welcome back to the Chapters of Growth podcast.
Yeah.
Today we're diving deep into Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Oh, yeah, this one's great.
It's all about these small changes,
Yeah.
the ones that can lead to big results, and we're going to break it all down for you.
It's amazing, how much we think about these huge goals
Right.
without really looking at the systems that actually get us there.
Yeah, like we get so focused on that endpoint.
Right.
But Atomic Habits, it really shows just how important the journey is.
Totally.
And that's where these atomic habits come into play, right?
Yeah.
What even makes a habit atomic?
Well, think of it this way. The word atomic, it's all about the smallest piece of a larger whole.
Yeah.
Just like atoms are the building blocks of, well, everything, atomic habits are those tiny changes that build up to big shifts.
Gotcha. So it's not about those massive overnight transformations, but more about the little improvements over time.
Exactly. And, James Clear's own story is a perfect example of this.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about recovering from this really bad brain injury. It was a long and slow process, but he focused on just improving a little bit each day. And all those small wins, they added up to a remarkable recovery.
That's incredible. It really shows that even when things are tough, focusing on the small steps can make a real difference.
For sure.
But how does this all connect to the idea of systems versus goals? You mentioned that earlier.
That's where it gets really interesting. Atomic habits. It says that goals are like the results we want,
Right.
but systems are the ways we get there.
Oh.
It's the difference between saying, I want to lose 10 pounds and actually making a plan for healthy eating and exercise.
It's not about being fixated on that number on the scale, but more about those habits that'll help you lose weight naturally.
Exactly. And the book says this really thought-provoking thing. Winners and losers, they often have the same goals.
Really?
It's the systems that they use that set them apart.
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting way to look at it. It's not just about wanting to win, but having the right system for it.
Absolutely. And speaking of systems, the heart of Atomic Habits is these 4 laws of behavior change.
Okay.
It's like a practical guide to building good habits and breaking bad ones.
And before we get into those, I just want to remind everyone listening that Chapters of Growth is all about these kinds of actionable insights. So if you're finding this helpful, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any future episodes.
Great idea.
Okay, now let's unpack these 4 laws, starting with the first one. Make it obvious.
All right, the first law, it's about knowing what triggers our habits.
Okay.
Our brains are always looking for cues in our environment that signal a reward.
Okay.
So when we see a cue, it triggers a craving, which then leads to a response. It's like an automatic loop.
That makes sense. But how do we use this to actually change our habits?
So, well, one way is to make those cues for good habits super obvious and hide the cues for the bad ones.
Gotcha.
For example, if you want to read more, keep a book right on your nightstand, or if you're trying to eat healthier, put a bowl of fruit on the counter.
So it's like setting up your surroundings to support your goals.
Exactly. Atomic Habits also suggest something called implementation intentions.
Okay.
It's where you plan exactly when and where you'll do a new habit. It's like, I will behave here at time in location.
So instead of saying I'll exercise more, you'd say, I will go for a 30-minute walk at 7 a.m. in my neighborhood.
Right. By being specific, you're making a plan, and it's harder to make excuses.
Makes sense.
There's another great technique called habit stacking.
Oh, what's that?
It's basically connecting a new habit to an existing one. So after I brush my teeth, I will meditate for 5 minutes.
Okay.
You're using that habit you already do, brushing your teeth, as a cue for the new habit.
That's really clever. It's like building on what you already do.
Exactly. And it's surprising how well these little tweaks work.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the book mentions this interesting exercise called the habit scorecard. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, the habit scorecard is all about noticing your current habits and figuring out which ones are good for you and which ones aren't.
Right.
It's like making a list of everything you do every day and then marking them as positive, negative, or neutral.
So it's like taking stock of all those things you do without even thinking.
Exactly. And sometimes just knowing about those unconscious habits is a big step toward changing them.
Totally. Now, we've covered making cues obvious, but what about making the habits themselves more appealing? That's where the second law comes in. Make it attractive. The second law, it really gets into why we want certain things. It's about how our brains are wired, to look for pleasure and avoid pain.
Right. So we're naturally drawn to things that feel good and try to avoid the ones that feel bad.
Exactly. And James Clear, he explains how we can use this to our advantage when we're trying to build good habits.
Okay, I'm listening.
One technique he talks about is temptation bundling.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've heard of that. Isn't that like pairing something you want to do with something you need to do?
Exactly. Like, let's say you really want to watch your favorite TV show,
Okay.
but you also need to exercise, you know?
Yeah.
With temptation bundling, you only let yourself watch that show while you're working out.
Ah, I see. So you're tricking your brain a little bit.
Right. It plays on our need for like instant gratification. Another great way to make habits more appealing is by using the power of the tribe.
Okay. How do we do that?
Well, think about it. We're social creatures, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're really influenced by the people around us. We tend to pick up habits that our culture likes, and we stick with habits that are normal in our social groups. Like, if all your friends are super into fitness and love going to the gym together, you're more likely to get into it too.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. And James Clear, he takes it even further. He says we tend to copy the habits of 3 groups: our close friends and family, our wider social circle, and people we see as successful.
So if we want to build a certain habit, it really helps to be around people who already do it.
Absolutely. If you want to read more, join a book club. If you want to find a running group that shared energy can be so motivating.
Yeah, it's like building a support system around what you want to achieve.
Exactly. And speaking of support, Atomic Habits also talks about motivation rituals.
Motivation rituals.
Yeah, it's this simple way to get yourself pumped before doing something tough.
Okay.
So the idea is to do something enjoyable right before the habit you want to build. Like, say you have trouble getting started with writing each day.
Mm-hmm.
You could create a little ritual where you light a candle, make some tea, and play calming music.
So you're setting the mood for a good writing session.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By pairing it with something you like, your brain sees it as more appealing.
Now, we've talked about making the habit obvious and attractive,
Yeah.
but what if you still struggle to do it, even if you really want to?
That's where the third law comes in. Make it easy. It's all about making good habits easy to do and bad habits harder.
So it's about clearing the path for good habits and putting obstacles in the way of bad ones.
Exactly. And one of the simplest ways to make habits easier is the 2-minute rule.
Okay, I've heard of that. What is it again?
The 2-minute rule says that when you're starting a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do.
Okay.
The idea is to break it down into the smallest possible step. Like, instead of saying, I'm going to work out for an hour, you could start with, I'm just going to put on my workout clothes.
So you're basically removing any excuse not to start.
Right. And it uses our brain's preference for immediate rewards. You know? Once you've got your workout clothes on, you're way more likely to actually exercise, even if it's just for a little bit.
That makes sense. And those little bits add up over time, right?
They do.
You know, that's what I love about Atomic Habits. It's not about those huge overnight changes. It's about making small, manageable changes that lead to big results in the long run. And for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to make some changes, don't forget to subscribe to the Chapters of Growth podcast channel for more deep dives just like this one.
Definitely a good idea.
Okay, back to the book. So we were talking about making things easy, and you mentioned environment design earlier. Remember when we were talking about cues?
Oh, yeah,
Well, it's also a big part of making habits easy.
for sure.
So, like, if I'm trying to eat healthier, I should stock my kitchen with good foods and hide the junk food right.
Exactly. Making healthy choices easy to grab and getting rid of temptation makes it much easier to stick with those good habits.
Environment design is so powerful for shaping our actions, isn't it?
Absolutely. And don't forget about technology. We use it to automate so many things already, like paying bills, setting reminders on our phones, even ordering food to make cooking simpler.
Right.
And we can use those same ideas to make good habits easier and bad habits harder.
So I could set up my bank to automatically transfer money to savings,
Yeah.
use an app to block websites that distract me, or even use a fitness tracker to see my progress.
Exactly. By using technology wisely, we can take some of the mental effort out of building those habits.
This has really given me a lot to think about. I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together to make real change.
That's the big takeaway here. It's not about willpower or motivation. It's about creating a system that supports you. And to make sure those behaviors really stick, we need to talk about the fourth law: make it satisfying.
All right, so we've got the first 3 laws down: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy.
Yep.
But how do we make those good habits stick around for good?
That's where the fourth law comes in: make it satisfying. This one's all about the reward system. It's about making sure those good habits are enjoyable and the bad ones, well, they have some consequences.
That makes sense. I mean, we're way more likely to keep doing the things that feel good and avoid the ones that don't.
Exactly. But there's a catch. Our brains are wired to want instant rewards over those that come later.
Oh, yeah?
That's why we sometimes struggle to stick with habits that require sacrifices in the present, even if we know they'll pay off later on.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like staying up late to watch TV even when, you'll be tired the next morning.
We've all been there. And that's why this fourth law, it really stresses the importance of making good habits feel good right away, even if the big payoff comes later.
So how do we make those good habits more rewarding in the moment?
One super effective way is habit tracking. It's a simple tool, but it's powerful.
Okay.
You could use an app, a spreadsheet, even just a calendar to mark off each day you do your habit.
Yeah, I've tried that before, and it's really motivating to see your progress right there in front of you.
It's like a visual reminder of your commitment and a little reward each time you check it off.
I like that.
James Clear, he points out that habit tracking it actually hits all four laws.
Really.
Makes the habit obvious, makes it attractive, and of course makes it satisfying.
Yeah, it's like this positive feedback loop.
Exactly. Now, another way to make things more satisfying and to stay accountable is through habit contracts.
Habit contracts, what are those?
It's like a formal agreement with yourself and ideally with an accountability partner, too.
Okay.
It lays out what you'll do and what happens if you don't follow through.
So it's like you're putting something on the line.
Right. By bringing someone else in and setting clear consequences, it strengthens your commitment and you're more likely to succeed.
It reminds me of what we talked about before about the power of the tribe.
It's all connected. We're social creatures and we care what others think, so we can use that to our advantage and create a support system that keeps us accountable.
This has been such an insightful look at atomic habits. I'm already thinking about how I can use these principles in my own life. And for everyone listening, if you're feeling inspired to make some positive changes, be sure to subscribe to the Chapters of Growth podcast channel for more deep dives into books and ideas that can help you grow.
Absolutely. There's always something new to learn.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into atomic habits. We hope you found it valuable.
Thanks for having me.
And don't forget to subscribe to the Chapters of Growth podcast channel for more inspiring conversations and actionable insights.
And keep growing.
See ya.